This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your go-to Iowa-based sports show, hosted by the one and only Elliot Clough.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles, like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
What's up, Cedar Valley, and hello to the Hawkeye State. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. My name is Elliot Clough, UNI insider for Town Square Media. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Elliot Clough. 1L1T and CLOUGH. We've got a packed show today, talking with not one, but two 24/7 sports experts. It's Nick Osen, covering the Cyclones for 24/7. And then David Eickholt joins us once again. He's the man who broke the news that Charlie Jones would be transferring from Iowa, the wide receiver and Big Ten returner of the year. He'll tell us why he made the move, who will replace his production, and more. First, though, we got to use some time to talk about UNI football. We haven't addressed it in a little while, so I figured it was time. I wrote a piece this week on 4 incoming transfers that were not around for spring ball this year, nor were they around at any point during the semester, so they will arrive for camp in the fall, summer, August, July, somewhere in there to assimilate themselves to Panther culture, so to speak. So very excited about all 4 of these guys. Again, if you want to read the article, it's on KOEL.com, but I'll tell you a little bit more about it right here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk. 4 guys coming in to the UNI football program from the transfer portal that I'm all excited about. All 4 have either spent time at FBS level programs or are currently at one and will be at the FCS level, obviously, joining UNI. So the first one I want to talk about is currently at an FCS school. Previous to that, he was at Houston. His name is Jonathan Fenix. He's a defensive back from Northern Arizona University. That's where he is currently at. Has yet to really play a ton of time at the collegiate level, but this last fall he did play for the Lumberjacks. He played a little bit in the spring as well. In the fall, he recorded 7 tackles, a pass breakup, and a fumble recovery. He started 2 games and played in 5 for the Lumberjacks. In the minimal amount of film that I've been able to see from Jonathan, he looks like a corner that could play at the level of UNI. Now, he did get a scholarship offer from the Panthers, so clearly they think they can work with him to become a player that plays more than, 5 games in his collegiate football career. There's clearly a reason he got an offer from Houston and went there initially. They did end up moving him to the running back position while in practice at Houston, so a little bit weird. I'm sure he didn't want to do that and gave it a shot, but ultimately said, hey, I'm a DB. I need to go somewhere else. Went to Northern Arizona, didn't quite get the time he wanted, so he will be a UNI Panther. Out of McGregor, Texas. In high school, he had offers from, Houston, Incarnate Word, and then also received interest from TCU. So Jonathan Fenix from NAU, Northern Arizona University, is one of the more new UNI Panthers. Also went to Houston before he went to NAU. Next up, we got Peter Udoybach, wide receiver from the University of Minnesota. He's a hometown kid, grew up in St. Paul, played his high school football there, and ultimately received a preferred walk-on offer from Minnesota. Didn't receive a scholarship, and when you receive a preferred walk-on spot, when you play college football, play college basketball, do anything at the collegiate level, really, what you're expecting is to receive a scholarship one way or another. Get on the field, prove your worth, receive a scholarship. Never happened for Udoybach, but he did get a lot of time on the practice field with the Golden Gophers and made some wild catches. You can see that tape again in that article on KOEL.com. The catches that he made in high school were pretty wild too, to the point where he received offers from North Dakota State, Air Force, South Dakota State, Wyoming, and Yale out of high school, while also receiving interest from Iowa and Iowa State. The dude's got talent. So I'm excited to see what he brings to UNI. He is on scholarship with the Panthers. That's another FBS wide receiver that you got in the ranks to add to Desmond Hudson, DeVell Washington, and I believe there's another FBS transfer in there as well, Quan Hampton. So it's just going to be a loaded group along with Logan Wolf, Sam Schnee, Deion McShane. The wide receiver group is going to be nasty. And speaking of which, there's a wide receiver slash linebacker coming in from Kansas. He's a New Orleans native. His name's Tacolve Williams. So yeah, quite a position pair, if I do say so myself. Wide receiver and linebacker. He played in 26 games total, caught 28 passes for 158 yards and a touchdown while in Lawrence. Never took a snap as a linebacker. For the 3 years that he did play there with the Jayhawks, wide receiver. They flipped him to linebacker. I'm assuming he still wants to be a wide receiver and is coming to UNI to get that figured out, along with Quan Hampton, who's already there from Kansas, and Dom Williams, who's right there from Kansas as well. So I really don't know what position he's going to play. I messaged him on Twitter, never got a response back, but I assume he's going to try to slim down again and play wide receiver for the Panthers. But the kid was pretty well recruited out of high school at that wide receiver position. He had a few punt returns, kick returns for touchdowns, showed off the speed, showed what he was capable of. But I believe he's a grad transfer and will be coming into UNI to hopefully take snaps and impact the game. I don't know, again, what position that's going to look like. Wide receiver group already super deep, already loaded with talent. So I don't know if he's going to try to get a medical red shirt and then come back next year when guys like Quan graduate. I genuinely don't know. I think Deion McShane is graduating as well. I have no idea what that's going to look like for Tacolve Williams. But either way, it's additional depth and additional talent to the UNI roster, which is not something to complain about. And excuse me, I'm just seeing that he was there for 4 years with Kansas, not 3 years. But out of high school, he had a ton of offers: Louisiana, Tulane, Ball State, Louisiana Monroe, Troy, McNeese State, and UT San Antonio. He also received interest from Cincinnati, Missouri, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma State. So he also joins Amari Pesic-Hickson, who is a more recent transfer from Kansas, who is a running back. I'm excited about what he can bring. Played a little bit in that spring game that was open to the public, and he didn't do a ton. He was with that third string, but I think that getting him a little more game speed and on the field in practice is going to help Pesic-Hickson get back to it. Then there's a name from Washington State that I really feel like I'm mispronouncing every single time. I need to get a hold of this kid to figure out how to pronounce it. He's Polynesian. He's from Hawaii. Penny Naulu, I think is how it's pronounced. Again, you can look this up on the article on KOEL.com. Decide for yourself. He's another FBS talent from Washington State. Some more positional versatility. I don't know what position he's going to play. Both positions are relatively deep with talent, and I think he can contribute on either side just because of the sheer raw ability that he has. And you'll understand what I'm about to say because this guy needs to be on the football field. He didn't play much in Pullman for the Cougars, but he did receive snaps on special teams. So he's got a little bit of experience on the field. I think he only registered one tackle in his career with the Cougars. But again, very highly touted recruit out of high school. He was recruited as a linebacker, but took snaps as a running back with the Cougars in practice. He was the 92nd ranked outside linebacker in the entire country, grew up in Hawaii, like I mentioned, and received scholarship offers. Listen, from these schools: Oregon, Washington, UCLA, Cal, Hawaii, Nebraska, Kansas State, San Diego State, and Oregon State. This dude can play football. And if he can get back to that type of potential we see in him at that outside linebacker position, this is a kid I am really excited about. Obviously, you got Bryce Flater, coming back, as well as Spencer Cuvalier, and then Ben Belkin behind him, or behind those guys. The linebacking core, they've got some real talent back there. But if Penny Naulu, again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, comes back to the college football ranks, contributes for UNI, he could be nasty. Nasty. Again, just go look at this kid's film and you will understand what I'm talking about, on top of the fact that he had all those offers from FBS schools coming out of high school. Again, you're listening to Corn Stalks and Sports Talk here on AM 950 KOEL with me, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. We're talking about new additions to the UNI football roster out of the transfer portal. We got 4 right there that are set in stone. They will be in Cedar Falls in the fall, and hopefully they'll be able to contribute. But there are a couple other possible additions that were given offers from UNI out of the portal, and we'll talk a little bit about them here. I'm not positive that any of these guys are going to be Panthers. There are a few I lean towards that I say, I could see it a little bit easier than what I do some of the other ones. But this first one is Jadson Turnetine. He's an offensive tackle, more recently at South Carolina, but spent 2 years of college football playing for Hutchinson Community College. And then, like I said, went from JUCO to the FBS, playing for the Gamecocks. And he was there. He appeared in 17 games, started in 10, and now it appears that there's no guarantee he's going to play. And he posted on his Twitter in all caps that said, I have 1 year left. I'm not coming back to the SEC to sit a year. I want to go somewhere to play now. So he's got offers from Louisiana Tech, Michigan State, Bowling Green, Florida State, Houston, Arkansas State, and UConn out of the portal. If any of those schools like Michigan State, Florida State, or Houston can offer him a spot this year, I would assume he's going to go there if they're really missing a tackle. But then again, UNI has put 2 guys in the NFL more recently that were offensive linemen. One was a first-round pick in Trevor Penning. The other one is now starting for the Buffalo Bills and Spencer Brown. So who's to say he doesn't look at UNI seriously? Either way, the offer's out there, and I think that would be crazy for them to bring him in. He would be great. And then there's Damian Cremity, defensive back from Western Illinois, who has been there for the more recent 2 years of his college football program, or for his college football career, rather. And he's only made 3 appearances, registered 2 tackles and a forced fumble while with the Leathernecks. So a bit confusing as to why UNI offered him. But then you go and look at his time when he was with Grambling State, which is an HBCU. He earned the majority of his snaps there. He played in 10 games both his sophomore and junior year for Grambling, recorded 58 tackles along with an interception and 5 pass breakups. You watch this guy in his film, and he explodes after the ball. Some of these clips, it's just like, damn, I see why Coach Farley offered that guy. But then he didn't play for Western Illinois. So I don't know. I wrote in the article, I said I'm assuming it's due to injury, but I don't know. There's no guarantee. Again, you go back and watch the film, and it's like, yeah, that kid could play for UNI. I don't know what's going on there. I'm assuming that he is, just coming off a sort of an injury situation, and he will be able to compete for a job at UNI. It might be an academic thing too. I really don't know. But out of high school, he had offers from Mississippi State, Kent State, Army, Air Force, and others. He also received interest from schools like Florida, Wisconsin, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Virginia. So the talent clearly there for Damian Cremity, defensive back, currently from Western Illinois. Then you got Chevalier Brenson, who's a wide receiver from Ball State. He just played 1 year and stayed 1 year in Muncie, Indiana, and caught 2 passes for 21 yards. He received quite a bit of attention out of high school, 21 offers, 3-star recruit. He had offers from schools like Illinois, Army, Memphis, and Central Michigan. But out of the portal right now, he's got offers from Illinois State, Tennessee State, Missouri State, and UNI. So some other MVFC schools in the running for Chevalier Brenson, but he did take a visit to UNI. So there's another possible addition to an already deep wide receiver group. I would not be surprised if either his offer was redacted after Udoibach committed, or that the kid just doesn't commit because he wants to play now and he doesn't see that necessarily as a possibility at UNI. Long term, it makes a lot of sense. You go to a school where you can learn from, Bodie Reeder, who I'm really excited about, quarterback coach, co-offensive coordinator. You're there with an FBS level quarterback in Theo Day, and then you got DeVell Washington. You got guys like, again, Quan Hampton and Peter Udoibach, guys you can learn from that. We're at that FBS level, but then you have the production of players like Isaiah Weston and Darius Fountain, who went on to play in the NFL. Again, I really think Isaiah's going to get a spot with the Browns, but one more possible addition to address before we move on to that second segment here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 and KOEL.com. It's Daniel Carson, who's a defensive lineman, again with Western Illinois, that didn't receive a ton of time. And this one is a sort of boom or bust situation to me because Daniel Carson spent his first 3 years of college football at Texas, like the Longhorns. And he had offers out of high school from schools like Alabama, Ohio State, 2021 national champions Georgia, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Iowa, Iowa State, and others. Daniel Carson was one of the top recruits in the country. He could have gone anywhere he wanted. Just a monster of a human being. And so this could be a situation where he comes in, things click, he figures it out, and is just an absolute terror to FCS offenses. That is a serious possibility. I mean, we've seen guys come out of UNI and be unreal talents, possibly be FCS Defensive Players of the Year, and that's the type of potential that Daniel Carson has. Now, if he can live up to it is a whole nother thing. We don't know. We haven't seen it at the collegiate level. I mean, with Western Illinois, he only played 7 games in the fall of 2021, recording 13 tackles and 2 tackles for a loss, as well as a sack. There's no guarantee with this. But as far as I can tell, he's only got 1 or 2 years left of collegiate eligibility. If you take that big swing and you whiff, you don't necessarily strike out. Because it's 1 year, it's 1 scholarship. It's not the end of the world. And on top of that, he's friends with Christian Boyd, who is a defensive tackle for UNI, and is coming off a foot injury. He said he's 100% healthy. He told me that at spring ball this year. And so I think if you take that swing on Carson, your defense can be elite. And if you swing and you miss, your defense is still pretty damn good because it's a Coach Farley defense. So those are the new additions to the football roster, or possible additions as well. To address a few more that are going to be there or were already there: Cordarius Bailey, DeVell Washington, as well as Desmond Hudson and Amari Pesic-Hickson were the initial additions to the roster out of the transfer portal, and were there for spring ball. Now, don't go anywhere. This second segment coming up, we're talking AJ Green's future once again with Nick Osen of 24/7 Sports. He covers the Cyclones there. We'll also, of course, be talking about the newest news. Tyrese Hunter, he is going to be a Texas Longhorn. Stick around for that. For right now, you're listening to Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com. And we're back here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com with me, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. So as we wait on the eventual decision by UNI's AJ Green as to whether or not he decides to go pro, we've seen a few predictions about where he'll end up between Iowa State and Duke. One of the people that posted a prediction was Nick Osen, who is the Iowa State beat reporter for 24/7 Sports. He's joining us now. Nick, you got to tell us, man, why did you predict AJ would be heading to Ames and becoming a Cyclone?
Yeah, as I've kind of alluded to, I'm a little newer to Iowa, so I didn't realize quite how much juice and, kind of how much buzz that would really create. But even in this moment, I still stick with it. There are a few main reasons. There's the obvious connection with his father, Kyle Green, as an assistant, right? We wouldn't really be having this discussion if it weren't for that. But that's not the only reason either. Iowa State showed what they can kind of do with I don't want to say makeshift, but kind of a roster with a lot of new faces, maybe not that high-end talent last year. They got all the way to the Sweet 16, right? And we're 18 minutes from an Elite Eight. So I think that the program has shown what they can do. From, kind of some of the intel that I've been able to get about AJ in the draft process, two of the things that people really want to see are scoring against, kind of higher end talent, as well as an ability to play defense at a higher level. And that is one thing. If you watched Iowa State last year, they can absolutely do that. And then from the Iowa State side, I've been pretty locked into that end, and they haven't been recruiting anyone else at this point. So I feel like with Kyle, Mr. Green on the staff as a coach, they would kind of have an idea of what AJ would do. Now, obviously, the Duke visit last week got a lot of publicity, and I knew about it going in. It certainly generated a lot of buzz for the Blue Devils, but I'm still pretty confident in what I've heard that he ends up as a Cyclone at the college basketball level.
We know he played for his dad for 3 years at UNI. Who knows how much of an impact that has on his decision. But also, one thing that I think some people look at Duke and say is that Coach K's not there anymore. You know, Coach K, the legend, and now it's John Shire, who was a great player at Duke, but he's not Coach K. Did that have anything to do with your prediction?
Yeah, I've heard some similar things like that. I think that Shire is going to be a great coach. I have been thoroughly impressed in terms of a recruiter, but I would say that, I maybe wouldn't still have that crystal ball prediction up, or I'd maybe be a little more concerned if it was Coach K, because he's, without a doubt, top 3 or 4, maybe number 1 ever in the sport, known to have many great relationships with the players, both in college and well after. When you look at all those NBA players that were at his ceremony and things like that, there's no question it's an incredible program. And, I've noted that when I've made these predictions, and it's not like, oh, you're scoffing Iowa State to go to Duke. It's an incredible spot, but just the way things have kind of gone down the line, and the fact that I also wouldn't be shocked if Trevor Keels comes back for Duke, based on some of the feedback that I've really seen, in some athletic articles from that publication, and where he's been slotted in mock drafts. And I just kind of have a hard time thinking that if AJ was set to go to Duke, that he wouldn't have tried to make that commitment on the visit, because he's already familiar with Iowa State. And, he's not necessarily brand new to this campus or this area, having experienced, the area well, as and his father, like I said, his family. So to me, all the intel I'm getting is leaning toward Iowa State right now.
There are a few different things, obviously, going into it, whether or not he feels the ACC will provide the challenge that the Big 12 does in terms of defense. I think that's important here on Cornstalk Sports Talk, AM 950 KOEL. But do you feel as though, when you look at AJ and what he brings to the game, that he can be that type of scorer that he was at UNI in the Big 12, when he's playing against Kansas, when he's playing against some of these better programs in the country?
I really do. Like I said, I'm newer to AJ's game than a lot of people around here. And I'm also a huge basketball nerd. So I watched just about every second I could with him in that G League, camp, in the scrimmage settings. And, it's obvious the first step can, maybe get a little quicker, and some things on defense, like I mentioned, but he had no problem, finding the open man, getting to the hole, getting his shot over anyone. As you know, it's kind of a different release. It's quick, and it's really spot on. So I not only think that, but the supporting cast with what the Cyclones have been able to do in the transfer portal is really, I think, going to help him, because he'll be the guy. There's no question he'd be the best scorer on the team, but I don't think it'll all be on his shoulders either, especially with some of the post presences that they've been able to get, and the return of, a Caleb Grill, Gabe Kelscher, who, won up Johnny Davis in the tournament. Obviously he's going to be a lottery pick. Oshunier. I think it's really going to be interesting if it happens. And, there are some other, kind of aspects to it where I think he can really flourish, including kind of that rotational defense. But yeah, scoring wise, I think it will translate to the Big 12 as long as he can get that shot up. And I would anticipate him still scoring 16 to 19 a game.
And to me, he's the perfect fit for this roster at Ames, especially with what they've done in the portal.
I truly couldn't agree more. And that's what I was kind of getting at with the recruiting aspect, right? They've got guys that can handle the ball, guys that can create their own shot, but maybe not a knockdown shooter like AJ, lockdown defenders, and now rim presences. He would be considered the quote unquote, missing piece. And I kind of did like a mailbag type thing just earlier this week. Someone asked what the expectations would be if AJ's on this roster. And I think it's to be in the rankings for most of the season. And I think it's to win at least one NCAA tournament game, because I would take this roster with an AJ Green over last year's in terms of depth and overall versatility.
Obviously, you're missing Tyrese Hunter, and he's a huge talent. But when you're looking at year-on-year basis, I think AJ plugs in with this roster and is huge among all the transfers that are there. And also, I think when you look at the difference between Duke and Iowa State is at Duke. Just based on sheer talent, you can get away with not playing defense. At Iowa State, this roster is very much focused on defense, and TJ Otzelberger made that clear last year too. So to me, that's a pull for AJ as well.
Exactly. He made it clear last year, and I actually had the chance to speak with TJ. You know, obviously we didn't talk about AJ Green, but he was on a tailgate tour press conference type thing last week, and defense is still expected to be a focus in hopes of trying to lead to more transition offense, which as a basketball fan, I think would be very exciting to watch with a guy like AJ Green, Kalsher, Jeremiah Williams, you know, these guys I've mentioned, Jazz Kuntz. I think the expectations would be there. And I think just from a pure watchability standpoint, I think the Cyclones would be a very fun team to take in.
Okay, Nick, one more question that we got to ask here or dive into, a topic that we got to dive into here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. Tyrese Hunter, he picks the Texas Longhorns. He's going to stay in the Big 12. Initial thoughts when the news broke, when you first heard about it?
Yeah, so I guess the initial, first kind of reaction was this is the team I expected. I almost put in a crystal ball. There was a lot of buzz recently because the three teams that I heard most throughout were Texas, Kansas, and Gonzaga. And, then it kind of, I spoke with some people a little more connected to Kansas. It seemed like it wasn't going to be that. And now that it's happened, part of it still seems a little surreal because it is in the Big 12. It makes some sense because of Hunter's, kind of specialties on the court, but not a ton, I would say, with like his best traits in terms of, playing in transition, being a facilitator. Texas, they've got some good scores. They've got a lot of talent, but they don't have a lot of shooting. And you want to surround a guy like Tyrese Hunter with shooting, like a guy like AJ Green, potentially, like we talked about before. So I think from a basketball standpoint, it's interesting. And I just think that it's going to really add to, the rivalry truly between Iowa State and Texas. Obviously, they split the series last season. And I think that both teams, especially if AJ Green comes to Iowa State, like we've talked about, I think both teams are going to be loaded. And I think it's going to make for a really interesting year in what should be, again, another packed Big 12. It really would appear that way.
And like you mentioned, Tyrese Hunter, that game against LSU in the NCAA tournament was not exhibit A of Tyrese Hunter. He's not that type of shooter on a regular basis. So you want to get that shooting around him. Of course, they have Timmy Allen and Marcus Carr coming back. They're two leading scorers from last season. So that's big. But also, they're bringing in two very highly recruited point guards, a 4-star and a 5-star. So it's not like he's just going to walk in and get the job. Did you think that was going to affect his choice?
I didn't necessarily because I knew that, kind of wherever he would go would have a defined role. But you're right. It's really interesting because so much of their talent, especially on the younger end, not only is the backcourt, but generally in that one, lead guard type of role. So that'll be interesting. I still think that I don't think Texas would have pushed that hard for a talent like Tyrese if they didn't have kind of a clear cut 32 to 34 minutes a game for him. He's a guy that is, I wrote it in my article, an absolute stud on the defensive end. I'll always remember that was the first thing that stuck out to me before, kind of his athleticism and his ability to get to the rim. He's got to work on finishing around the rim and shooting, like you mentioned. But in all sincerity, it makes, the Big 12 and Texas even tougher. And I think that there are going to be really 4 to 7 teams that are really going to make things interesting and a nightly challenge again in this conference.
4 to 7 teams. That is wild. Okay, we got Iowa State, the Longhorns, Kansas. Help me.
Texas Tech is reloading.
Yep.
Oklahoma State, not necessarily a contender, but they bring a lot of guys back. Actually, Avery Anderson withdrawing from the NBA draft. They made things tough. They actually beat Iowa State in Hilton last year. So it's going to be Baylor, of course.
Oh, right.
There's been a lot of talent back, plus a couple transfers, including Jalen Bridges from West Virginia. So, yeah, I mean, that's 6 right there, my friend.
That is going to be a gauntlet for every team, night in, night out. And, you can be as talented as you want, but when you play defense every night, like you're going to see in the Big 12, it's going to be a bloodbath, to say the least. Now, one more question for you before we let you go, Nick. How do you think Iowa State fans are going to receive this? Do you think Tyrese Hunter is going to get booed out of Hilton Coliseum in the fall?
Yeah, there's just no way, if I'm being honest, no other way to expect that to go. I'm already seeing tweets and, a couple things on articles. I think that there is a pretty big group, even from what I'm seeing, that respects the decision to leave. And, he provided one of the most memorable years in recent memory. But I think the fact that it's in the Big 12 and people around here do not rock with Texas at all, I consider that maybe their second biggest rival in conference after Kansas from what I see since I've been here. I think there will be a heavy amount of boos. I don't think he'll be received very warmly at Hilton come this season.
We will see. We'll see on AJ Green. We'll see how Tyrese Hunter is received. Who knows? By the end of the weekend, you and I will maybe be talking again as to where AJ Green ends up. But he is Nick Osen, at the real Nick Osen on Twitter. You need Cyclone information, you give him a follow right there. He covers them for 24/7 Sports. Nick, we appreciate you, man.
Great time, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We will be right back with David Eickholt of 24/7 Sports and HawkeyeInsider.com. And he's going to tell us a little bit more about Charlie Jones' decision to transfer and no longer be a Hawkeye. Don't go anywhere. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com.
And we're back here for this third segment on Cornstalks and Sports Talk with me, Elliot Clough, on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com. So it sure seems that we've got a lot of Iowa football news coming constantly this offseason as it progresses. This time around, it's about Big Ten returner of the year, Charlie Jones, announcing he's going to transfer. So tough news, but luckily we've got the man himself from 24/7 Sports, David Eickholt, who reported. David, where did this come from, man?
Yeah, always good to be talking to you. This was sort of out left field, Ellie, between talking to some people within the program. Nobody really expected this. I think this took everybody by a big surprise. But, when I sit back and I kind of evaluate where things are at, it's not necessarily surprising to me. And let me explain myself. One, Charlie Jones is very beloved in Iowa, right? I mean, he was a fan favorite. He provides spark in the return game. But when you thought about the receiving options, who are you thinking of first? Sam Laporta. Okay, who are you going after that? Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce, Nico Reganey. You don't get to Charlie till probably fifth, right? Well, Charlie wants to put tape, NFL wide receiver tape, so he has the best shot making the league, right? Based on next year, was there really going to be a bigger role for him in the offense? You're going to have a hard time convincing me that you need to take targets away from Arlen Bruce, from Keegan Johnson, from Sam Laporta, and even Luke Lachey, because I think Luke Lachey can be a big-time red zone threat. So when you put all those factors into account, Charlie might want to go somewhere and be the number 2, number 3 option, maybe have a chance to go put up 40, 45 catches for 700 yards, 5 touchdowns. And, when you evaluate the targets from last season, here's the stat for you. Tyler Goodson had 4 more targets last season in the passing game than Charlie Jones. So I don't think this is necessarily an indictment on Spencer Petras or Iowa's offense. I think Charlie's seeking a bigger role from a receiving standpoint to be able to have a shot making the NFL, because if Charlie comes back and does the same thing he did last year in the return game, puts up 25 catches, okay, he'll give him he won't get drafted. That's just the reality. You have to go out there and you have to showcase some things. And again, you have a hard time convincing me that you need to throw the ball at Charlie Jones more than Keegan and Arlen.
So you mentioned the issue not necessarily being the offense, not necessarily being Spencer Petras or Alex Padilla at quarterback, but at the same time, do you think, along with the fact that he probably wants to be number 2, number 3 option, do you think he'd be more inclined to go somewhere where it's more of a spread it out offense and you're going to get a quarterback who's going to throw it 40, 50 times a game?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because there's a clear front runner right now, and it was leaked a little bit yesterday, but it's very interesting, before I say the name of the school, that this offense would raid Iowa's wide receiver corps. And if you haven't gotten the hint by now, I'm talking about the Purdue Boilermakers. I think that Charlie Jones and Aiden O'Connell are childhood friends. We know Aiden O'Connell is capable of. I think he's a very, very good quarterback. Showcased that last year for the Boilermakers. But again, it's kind of funny when you think about Tyrone Tracy being there and then Charlie Jones. And I'll say, if the ultimate indictment on Iowa's offense hasn't happened yet, it's going to be if Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy combined for 100 catches, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns, right? So if that happens, I think that's when Kirk's going to need to overhaul everything if he doesn't already feel that way, and clearly he doesn't. But the timing of it's off. I know a lot of people are skeptical about it. And here's what I would say to that. If he does go to Purdue, remember this, 2 weeks ago, Milton Wright, who is supposed to be the number one option for the Purdue Boilermakers next year at wide receiver, is ruled academically ineligible. So he will not be on the team next year. So that opened up a wide receiver slot. So who knows if Aiden O'Connell reached out after that, because I do full-heartedly believe that Charlie Jones came back, when he announced his return to Iowa, he committed to playing for Iowa next year. But again, circumstances have changed. And I don't think this is tampering. I don't think this is NIL. I know people have thrown out NIL because Iowa hasn't announced a collective yet. But here's what I would caution people, and even Charlie Jones. And again, I'm not saying Charlie Jones is doing this. But if you're a sixth-year senior and you leave to go somewhere to get NIL money instead of prioritizing what you need to do to get to the league and making that sort of money, your priorities are in the wrong freaking place, okay? So I don't think NIL is on the table, but I know Notre Dame's very interested. I know there's a few other schools that are very interested, and he's going to be a hot commodity on the transfer portal because, again, he right now is probably the best return man in the transfer portal, and he believes that he can be more of a capable wide receiver elsewhere. And the other thing I would say this, when you talk about Padilla and Petrus and Charlie Jones are very good friends. That's been very public news. So, I mean, I clearly was an easy thing, but I think when you have a free transfer and in the era that we live in, and, Charlie Jones can do what he feels best for his potential career. And if he believes leaving Iowa is the way to do it, then it's obviously Iowa doesn't have to be happy about it, but I also at the same time, you can't really blame the guy for doing what he believes is best for himself, and he doesn't owe anybody anything.
I suppose to sort of clear the air on why Jones is transferring, is there any internal issue? I mean, because what I've heard and what I've been told is, he's a great locker room guy. Like you said, great friends with Spencer Petras and with other teammates. It's really just about looking that opportunity to show off to NFL scouts.
That's what my estimation based on who I've talked to is. But I think it's important to note that Iowa was not anticipating this, at least the players. I don't know if the coaches were. I don't know if there was conversations between Jones before he entered the portal or not. And I know people are thinking, well, didn't the deadline already pass? Yes. But remember, Charlie is a grad transfer. Yes, he transferred from Buffalo to Iowa, but that transfer doesn't negate him because remember, he left a scholarship from Buffalo and walked on to Iowa. So it's not the same sort of caveats, so to speak, as in hurdles, as if it was a scholarship to a scholarship. He had to go a year off scholarship. Iowa ended up rewarding him because he ended up doing some good things. So that, in my estimation, that is. But again, Iowa players were taken back by it. I have a hard time believing the coaches weren't either. So for a guy who I do believe respects Iowa to death, loves Iowa, for him to go out the way he sort of did is kind of strange to me, because if you would have asked me, Elliot, who's going to be at Big Ten Media Days, Charlie Jones probably would have been near the top of the list for me. And that makes it even more of a bit of a surprise.
Again, we're talking with David Eickholt, 24/7 Sports and Hawkeye Insider here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. How much does this impact the wide receiver group? I mean, you like you mentioned, Nico Reganey, Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce are the only ones coming back with some semblance of experience in the wide receiver group. Obviously, you mentioned Lachey and Laporta too. But is there any realm of oh crap, two of our best wide receivers are sophomores?
I would think there's a little bit. I think Iowa's very top heavy right now, and they have to develop some depth. And, not to, rub salt in the wound, but this probably would have been a little bit negated if Iowa landed Kyler Casper and he reclassified in 2022. But I do think this throws a lot of pressure on Kelton Copeland and the Iowa offense for next season, as far as they have to land a couple wide receivers next year. They have Alex Moda, who I think is a 4-star talent, in-state kid from Marion, I believe. He's got very good upside, very good speed. I think Brody Brecht could help next season. I think this also accelerates his development. I know he missed a lot of spring because he's with the baseball team, but 6'4", big guy, big red zone threat. I mean, throw him on the field with Keegan and Arlen. I think that, there could be some good things there. I think this also puts a lot of pressure on Nico Reganey to regain that sort of swagger he had through his first couple of seasons at Iowa. And, maybe Jackson Ritter has to come up with some snaps as well. Maybe Deontay Vines, who I've been very high on. I know he hasn't gotten a lot of time, but Deontay Vines has a very intriguing skill set. He's been in the program a couple of years. But I think if you look at from a pure numbers wise right now with the Iowa scholarship guys, I think you're a little bit worried. I think you have to be a little bit worried. But again, very, very top heavy. If I think if you have Keegan, you have Arlen, and you have Nico, I think that's a pretty solid top three. I think if you can make Brody that number 4, I think that'd be a very good thing as well. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure because if you look at, I think since 2020, I think Iowa's had 5 wide receivers transfer. Now, granted, none of them were a big surprise. Like they weren't better than the guys in front. But you look at, I think won't be all name off the top of my head, but Desmond Hudson, Calvin Lockett, Tyrone Tracy obviously left. I mean, there's guys, and now Charlie Jones, like there's guys that have left. So, I'm very interested. I don't think it's indictment on Kelton Copeland. I don't think it's indictment on the offense. I think they saw better opportunity elsewhere, but this certainly puts pressure on the backups to develop some depth, and it puts even more pressure on Keegan and Arlen, those guys that they got to be able to produce. They got to be able to open up for the run game, and Iowa has to be able to spread the football out.
One other thing, that goes along with Charlie Jones. You think wide receiver, sure, but you obviously think return game. He's obviously the best in the portal now, and was the best in the Big Ten recently last year. How about who's going to step up there? Who's gonna fill that spot?
I think there's a lot of intriguing options. As great as Charlie was, I'm not saying guys can step up and is capable of what he's doing, but Iowa has a lot of very intriguing guys. I think Cooper DeJean is going to be the favorite right now. I think he's very athletic. I think he's got high upside, probably the most versatile football player on Iowa's team, which sounds crazy considering he's only a sophomore, played in 5 games last year. But I think he could bring some different things to the table. I think Arlen Bruce would have a good shot at. And this is just my, tinfoil hat theory. I love to see Xavier Wampa in the return game personally. I think you talk about a 5-star athlete, 6'3", 213 pounds now, was a flat out winner for Southeast Polk to make game winning plays. I think he can be back there. Maybe throwing a DB back there as well. I think there's plenty of guys that are capable of stepping up back there, but I do think that Cooper DeJean's going to be a guy. And I believe Iowa Western wide receiver, Caden Weegan, is going to be another guy who was a great returner. He's a walk-on right now. He made some very good plays in the receiving game as well during the spring game, and he's been compared a lot to Charlie Jones in the return game. So I think he'll have certainly a shot as well. But again, I think Cooper DeJean right now is probably the favorite.
So I told this to, I think it was John Steppe a couple of weeks ago here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. We were talking about Cooper DeJean a little bit and what he'd do on defense. I know I saw some interviews there. They were talking about the cash position for him. Yep. And I also saw some of your tweets during the spring game about Cooper. I went to the same high school Cooper did, believe it or not.
Okay.
I don't think that he's quite a bit younger than me and we are. I would not have guessed he would have looked up to me as an athlete, but I like to think that he did. But do you see him playing sort of that cash position defensively or being a safety this year, or he played a time at corner last year? What do you see for Cooper?
I think Iowa right now at corner is feeling pretty good. Remember, Jamari Harris is suspended for the season opener after the OWI, but I think he's going to be a factor. Terry Roberts, obviously, I think it could be special there. Iowa gets Riley Moss back. I think Cooper's too versatile to keep off the field. I know there's plenty of options, the cash position. I think Iowa's got a tough time doing the 4-3 in the 4-2-5 because I don't know how you take Justin Jacobs off the field either. It's almost like a luxury of riches, right? I think Cooper's the favorite. I think Sebastian Castro is going to be another guy. Maybe your Xavier Wampa's there as well. I know Quinn Schulte, I think, has the opposite safety spot locked down. I think he's done a really good job through spring and the buzz I've heard about him. I think Kayvon Merriweather is going to have that other safety spot locked down. But at the same time, you get two athletes caliber, Cooper and Xavier. I don't know how you keep them off the field. I really don't. Iowa defense thrives off playmaking. Cooper DeJean was a flat-out winner in high school, just like Xavier. Xavier made game-winning plays, seems like multiple times throughout his last season, and he's the highest-rated defensive back to ever commit to the University of Iowa. With all due respect to Quinn Schulte, it's going to be very tough to keep starting him over Xavier, and that's not an indictment on Quinn. That's just the reality of the situation. But as far as Cooper goes, I think right now, if I had to bet, I think he'd be the starting cash week 1 against South Dakota State on September 3rd.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see that for sure. Again, we're talking with David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports, Hawkeye Insider. Broke the news of Charlie Jones entering the transfer portal yesterday. Or Thursday, Wednesday.
It all runs together at this point.
I know, right? So more football before we let you go, David. I'm sure you've got your eyes on the recruiting trail this offseason while football isn't necessarily in full swing. Huge potential for this recruit out of Southeast Polk. Wow, I feel like we've heard that before. Caden Proctor, who's a 5-star tackle. Every school in the country wants that guy. What's the likelihood he becomes a Hawkeye in your mind's eye?
Yeah, first of all, people aren't following Sean Bach at Hawkeye Insider. Be sure to follow at SBach247. He has, I think, the best job on the recruiting trail in the market. His work ethic's crazy. But as far as Caden Proctor goes, Iowa is not getting an official visit from Caden Proctor. Of course, that set off everybody on Twitter. Do not panic. Iowa's our crystal ball right now, which predicts where recruits are going to go, is on the University of Iowa to land Caden Proctor. Proctor, I think, is going to visit at least 1 or 2 more times. I would very much bet that he reached out to Xavier Wampa and asked him if it was even worth it to take an official. And Xavier probably said, no, you've been here 10 plus times. You know what it's about. But, when Caden went to the University of Oregon, I think it kind of opened his eyes a little bit more to go see some other programs. So I think Michigan has an outside shot. Alabama, of course, is going to be some competition. Oregon's probably the biggest competition right now. And, I don't know the impact of this offer yet, but it's be worth saying Jackson State offered him today with Coach Prime. And I think they landed the nation's #1 recruit last year in Travis Hunter. So I'm not counting out Coach Prime in that either. But again, that's no inside intel. That's just my own 2 cents tinfoil hat theory about. But again, I think Iowa right now is in very good position. They've done the full court press on him. They've been, talking to him since I think he was 14 years old, since he was a measly 6'5", 285 pounder and says 6'7", 335. So Iowa's doing a great job. They're going to get a couple more visits from him. I still think they're in the driver's seat, but I think the recruitment is going a bit longer than most people wanted it to.
You mentioned his visit to Eugene and seeing the Ducks campus. I think I saw on Twitter that he was going, and the fact that it opened his eyes, rather. I think I saw on Twitter that he's taking an official visit to Arkansas State too. When I saw that, I was like, this dude is really taking every opportunity he can to visit schools.
Well, remember, Jackson Daly, the Southeast Polk quarterback, is now a Arkansas State quarterback and football player. So I'm pretty sure for the most part, they're going to give him a pitch, but Proctor's probably going out there to hang out with his buddy for a couple of days and to go see it. And, I can't blame him. If I was in his position, though, I'd be going to Miami. I'd be going to New York. I'd be going to Hawaii. I'd be going to UCLA. I'd be doing some other things like that. But, hey, each their own.
Right. I mean, if somebody else is paying for it, sign me up.
Please. I'll listen to all your, I relate to, the real estate pitch, right? You get, a 3-day cabin in what's the ski resort in Colorado? That's super famous.
Breckenridge?
Oh, sure. We'll go with Breckenridge. I'll listen to your day-long pitch in Breckenridge if you're going to pay for me to stay for 3 days. That's fine.
Exactly. So he is David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports, HawkeyeInsider.com. Check it out. He's got great stuff there. He is, what's your handle? Tell us what your handle is on Twitter.
Just at David Eickholt.
At David Eickholt. Go follow him. Great stuff if you want to pay attention to Hawkeye sports at all times of the year. David, thanks so much for joining us again, man.
Hey, always appreciate it, man. Thank you.
And that'll do it for this week's episode of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk here on AM 950 KOEL with me, Elliot Clough. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. If you missed any part of this episode, you can always listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcast. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe, leave a rate and review. It does really help us out. In terms of exposure, we want to give Iowa sports as much spotlight as they deserve. Also, you can always check out segments on YouTube from the show when we have our guests. Those are always uploaded to my YouTube page, which is Elliot Clough there. Subscribe. Drop a like, drop a comment and let us know what you think of the show. What do you think of these interviews? We really appreciate that as well. So once again, folks, I am Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter, and this was another week's edition of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.